Hard Parking, sponsored by Wright Honda and Wright Toyota out of Scottsdale, Arizona. I am back home in Gilbert, Arizona after 2.5 weeks in Europe. And when I say Europe, specifically Spain and Portugal, Europe is 40-something countries. Spain and Portugal is 2. So you know what this is. You know what's coming up. The recap of my 2.5 weeks, including an incredible story about some very expensive toothpaste, as well as me stealing fuel on accident. Also, on the way back, a connecting flight from Barcelona to Philly. The gentleman sitting behind me had mentioned Scottsdale. I was wearing my Hard Parking shirt, and he recognized Wright Toyota on one of my sleeves. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, thank you very much. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because I can promise you, if it's not just this episode, there will be future episodes that you will want to listen to, because no show is like this show, loosely automotive, mostly life. And before we get to this word from Foil Online, a special shout out to Brindley, Jasmine, Bob and Kara, Mark and his girlfriend from Dublin, Ireland, as well as Renee and Christy. This was the group that we hung out after one of our experiences in Barcelona on the first part of our trip. You're going to hear about that and more coming up after this word from 4Wheel Online. For over a decade, 4Wheel Online has been bringing the best truck accessories and truck parts to enhance the appearance and performance of all trucks and SUVs. They are dedicated to providing an extensive range of upgrades that will match any maker model on the road. The truck products cover everything to give your truck a custom look and added functionality. Need a wheel and tire package? Head over and use the configuration tool. They carry all the major brands of wheels and tires, so go get outfitted today. Visit them online at 4Wheel Online. Yeah, so Europe is a little different. We've gone before. We've gone to Italy 10 years ago or so. Yeah, I think it was 10 years ago. And so things are obviously going to be different in 10 years. But what we didn't do 10 years ago was rent a vehicle, which we ended up doing in Portugal. That's going to come up in a little bit. As, of course, you guys know, I'm going to run down a list of vehicles. That was getting tired of it. Getting tired of me taking photos and pointing out cars. But you guys, I love cars. I love to see the differences between the cars that we have here in America and the cars that I see anywhere else that I travel, whether it's close, like Canada, or Mexico, which you have some of the same and some different. Italy, when I went there 10 years ago, and of course this trip was no different. I took pages of notes on this trip where there's just things that I have to talk about. Kind of talk about some of the little differences, the differences in the people, some of the awesome experiences, you know, what excursions that we did via Viator or Viator, I never know how to say it, where we stayed, and then mix in a couple funny stories about, like I said, toothpaste, my tiny rental car, which means you're going to get a rental car review. And of course, the movies that I watched on the airplane. I watched one called Eating Our Way to Extinction. That messed me up. Watched Ford versus Holden. Watched the Ferrari movie with Adam Driver. There's a handful of movies that I wanted to watch, but I'm trying to say that for my YouTube reaction channel that is failing miserably. I haven't started a second one. It's just as bad, if not worse. But once I get through Fallout, we'll reevaluate what's going on and adjust our strategies to move forward. And so I think what I'm going to do, with the exception of the dedicated sections for the specific stories in the specific cars, is kind of go through semi-chronologically, starting with, as many of you know, my daughter is pregnant, and at any day she's going to have her third child, and this is stressing the hell out of my wife. And I just wanted my daughter to have her third baby so that we can get on with our lives and enjoy our vacation, so that the whole time my wife wasn't stressed out about things on the other side of the world. 2 nights before we leave, my daughter notifies us she's on her way over because she thinks she's getting ready to give birth. I'm thinking, thank God, because now my wife can chill the F out and we can go on vacation. But the problem is, at this point, we're talking 5.5 weeks premature, which is not a good thing. So the kids come over. We get no sleep that night because my granddaughter was on one and she was yelling and screaming till 4 o'clock in the morning. I picked her up and she stopped for a little while. I was thinking I'm the champion, and then she just let loose again. But when they're that small, she's 16 months old. When they're that small, she doesn't really talk yet, and you don't know what they're crying about. So you can't get frustrated. You just have to kind of suck it up and deal with it. And it's my granddaughter. So I wasn't cranky, but we thought we were going to be able to do it. So the next day, my daughter's still in the hospital. That night, we have to leave. So we have to leave the kids with my mother-in-law, of course, who lives with us. You guys know who that is. And so we pack up. Now, before we left, we decided to apply for the American Express Platinum card, which is a great travel card. We are a gold family. You use gold for everything. Tons of points. In fact, our points ended up paying for, I think, part of our trip, a portion of our trip, something about our trip. I don't remember exactly what it paid for, but it paid for something. So we switched to the Platinum because my wife really wanted the Centurion Lounge, the American Express lounges in the airports. Because when you go to American Express Lounge, for you travelers, FYI, it doesn't matter which airlines you're flying as long as you are flying on an airlines. Well, the problem with the Centurion Lounge is to go to a Centurion Lounge proper, both the card holder and your guest have to have that card. So there's two types of cards you can get. This isn't a credit card podcast, but there's two types of cards you can get. There's a companion card, and there's the secondary card. The secondary card costs, I don't know, $125, maybe $260. The companion card, I think it's companion card. Whatever the other one is, doesn't cost anything, but you don't get the same benefits. So FYI, we went to the Centurion Lounge. They go, well, you can get in, Mr. Pfenning, but your guest has to pay, I think it's like $40. We're like, screw that. But there's another lounge in there like that shares the same entrance that as long as I have the card, my wife came in. So that was perfect. We went in there, had some breakfast, got on our flight, flew out. That's when I watched Eating Our Way to Extinction. After watching it for a little bit, I don't know, 30 seconds, it was pretty clear that it was a vegan-driven documentary. But the fact that it was a documentary, I wanted to watch more of it because you can't really lie on documentaries. You have to try to be as truthful as possible. And I'm trying to force myself to watch more things like this to better educate myself of what's going on in the world. But they're saying that livestock farming is the leading cause of us eating our way to extinction. And what that means is, and I'm a carnivore through and through, okay? So what that means is they're destroying crops everywhere in order to raise these farmlands and put out all these cattle and pigs. So obviously it's deforestation, but instead of deforestation for cutting down trees to build things, it's deforestation because of animals. Again, vegan-driven documentary. But with that being said, I learned some things on there and took some notes. Livestock farming. They have methane, nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, and regular oxygen. So those are the four gases that are contributing to this global warming thing. So what they did is they did an experiment. They had 4 ice spheres, all looking like the Earth. Cute. And in each one, they had each of the 4 gases. And I forgot how long that they did this display. I want to say 4 hours. At the end of the 4 hours, naturally, the ice that had just oxygen in it melted the least amount. And the ice that had the methane melted the most. Like a dramatic amount of ice had melted because of the methane. They say cows burping and farting are a high cause of global warming. It's not even our cars like everybody wants us to think. It's not construction. It's not industry. It's cows. Livestock is taking over, which I found that to be very interesting. I'm not doubting it. I just, we don't ever hear about stuff like that, which is why I watch this documentary. The other interesting thing is, all the waste in the ocean, all the plastic. Well, according to this documentary, 80% of the plastic in the ocean is from fishing. Fishing equipments, the microplastics, they break down over time. It's not just our water bottles that we all talk about and all the human normal consumption waste. It's old fishing equipment over hundreds of years, thousands of years, however long they've been making plastic, maybe not thousands of years. Think about the rope, the plastic rope, anything that you would find on a fishing boat that's actually plastic. What happens is the plankton consume these plastics. So they had plankton underneath a microscope, and you can see the plankton breathing in these microplastics. And of course, obviously what happens after that is the plankton eat the algae and the microplastics, and then the fish eat the plankton, and we eat the fish. According to this documentary, over 1/3 of the fish we eat has these microplastics in it. That's some scary stuff. And they started talking about, well, instead of getting our oils from omega-3s, the fish oil pills, of course, the best way to get it is through plant-based pills, and your body will start producing these omega-3s. I'm not refuting that. I haven't done that research. I'm counting on them to do that research. Another thing they had said on here was, well, they had 2 butchers on there. And this is what messed me up for like a week. 2 former butchers. One was from New Zealand and one was from some other country, not the U.S. I have to believe that the FDA is a little more rigorous, but we don't know, right? But they were talking about what happens in a butcher shop behind the scenes before you get the meat to you. And I'm not even going to talk about what disgusting thing I saw, but that messed me up as I flew into Barcelona, which is, they have meat everywhere. Every market you go into, there's legs of animals of cured meat. They're being held by the hoof, and they just take the knife and they slice off. Used to be muscle, cured muscle, and it's interesting. It's gross. I love meat. I love cured ham, but I was messed up for like a week after watching this thing. One of the other things they're talking about is they're saying the farmers can't farm anymore because of the droughts. California is on pace to lose 500,000 to 1 million acres over the next few years. So the big takeaway I took from this thing is they want us all to be vegan. But how can we be vegan if there's no crops? They stated that if everyone stopped eating meat tomorrow, in the next, 20 years, we would have 75% of everything back. I also learned that because of the drought, Spain has built a bordering wall to keep out migrants, but they're called climate migrants because they can't grow crops south of Spain. People are coming over there to use the fresh soil. Now that's crazy. So they're eating our way to extinction. That was from Philly to Barcelona, about 7.5 hour flight. From Phoenix to Philly, it was about, 4-hour flight. I don't remember watching anything. That's when I took out my laptop and was going to work on some of the podcast interviews and some of my reaction videos. I had episodes 1 through 5 loaded on there for Fallout. I had Gentry Stein, the Yo-Yo Champions video. And I also had Kyle Nielsen's video and audio. Except I grabbed the wrong hard drive. So at this point, I didn't have really any of that. Now, fortunately, I had Gentry Stein's audio synced to my Microsoft OneNote cloud. So once I landed in Barcelona and hooked up to the Wi-Fi, it automatically downloaded, and I was able to at least get that taken care of. But I was super bummed. I wouldn't have had much time on the trip anyway to do much of that, but I could have done some of it because my wife ended up getting sick for a couple of days while we were there. And of course, during that time, it's downtime, and I could have worked on a few things. I've survived. Everything's good, but we get to Barcelona in the morning. It's in the future. It's like 9-hour difference from Arizona or San Francisco. 8 or 9 hours, doesn't matter. But by the time we get there, we have to lollygag for a few hours before we can check in. Had breakfast. My breakfast came with ham. And of course, the meat over there is different. And I remember that from going to Italy. It's just different. Everything is cured. Everything is salted and cured. So there is no soft deli meat ham like you're used to here in the United States. It just doesn't exist. Everything is bread, hard-ass cheese, and hard-ass meat. Good, but the cured meat isn't always hard. It's kind of, the meat part is meaty, but the fat looks like it's raw, although it's not. Now, keep in mind, I just watched that freaking Eating Our Way to Extinction documentary, and my wife says, I don't know why you watched that on the way to Barcelona. You know what kind of foods they have here. You know all the open markets. I go, I know, but that messed me up, like I said. That messed me up for about a week, at least a week and a half, 2 weeks into our trip. In fact, it wasn't until the last few days in our trip I said, screw it, I'm eating whatever I want to eat. So we ended up checking into our Airbnb, this was kind of an old, and I think it's an older neighborhood in Barcelona to where it kind of feels, those neighborhoods that are just outside of downtown? No, not the ghetto, but those other neighborhoods where they're kind of young business professional hipster neighborhoods, but it kind of had that kind of feel, although there's nothing but old people walking around in winter coats because they're freezing their ass off because they're old. But anyway, the Airbnb was one of those apartments to where it was 3 doors down from the breakfast thing. So the entrance was, if you're looking at the front of our building, to the right you have 3 or 4 restaurants. To the left you have a couple clothing shops, miscellaneous shops, a couple more restaurants, a grocery store. So it was one of those deals. And then right across the street from us, there was a giant market. And I guess all these neighborhoods have their own giant market, like right in the middle of it. And those are the markets where you go in And you ever been to Pike Market in Seattle? It's kind of like that, but a lot smaller. But you have all the fresh seafood. You have the meats. You have all the different cheeses. A couple places in there to eat and to drink. Flowers, miscellaneous clothing stores. No name brands. Just a bunch of like local, almost swap meet-ish type of stuff. Shoes. So this was right in front of our apartment. But we couldn't, trying to get in, the instructions were never that clear. Fortunately, one of the guys who kind of helps manage that place was really nice. We were able to store our luggage for a few hours until it was officially time to check in. When we got done doing that whole fiasco, we got into the apartment and everything's nice. And this is when we started noticing some of the small differences. For instance, the toilet seats have no chill. And what I mean is you bring the seat down and it comes crashing down. So you have to like kind of let it down gently. I do. I don't mind touching the toilet seat when I lift it up or put it down. Obviously I'm going to wash my hands. We also found out during this time that Barcelona was under one of the biggest droughts they've ever had. They didn't have a good winter, and so the water usage was limited. And so I was very conscious of that because I like to take super long showers. What I do when I just stand in the hot water sometimes and I just think about life, whether I'm shaving, washing myself, or just standing there slowly adjusting the temperature every 5 minutes as it gets cooler to where I can use up all the hot water. That's my normal shower routine. But I didn't do that there. But the toilet paper was smaller. The paper towels were smaller. In the kitchen, they had an all-in-one washer dryer unit, which was garbage. One of our last nights in Barcelona on the first round of the trip, because let me just break this down really quick. We went to Barcelona. We took a side trip because of the weather. We went back to Barcelona. Then we went to Lisbon. Then we went to Lagos. Lisbon and Lagos are in Portugal. Then we went back to Barcelona, and then we flew home. So that's what we did as kind of a high level of where we traveled during this trip. High level, because there's one spot in there that I haven't mentioned yet, and I'm going to in a few minutes. So the first couple of days in Barcelona, we're chill. We're doing a few things. One of the things you notice when you go to the restaurants is you immediately notice the service. In Barcelona, where we're at, the service is a little more like America, but during this whole trip, nothing was like America. And what I mean by that is no one's saying when they come to your table, is this your first time eating here? Would you like to eat? Hey, my name is, sometimes they introduce themselves, sometimes they didn't. They were just like, what do you want? You order what you want. It's just the friendliness, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Almost 100% on this trip wasn't there. There was one restaurant we went to in Lisbon where they were just showering you with smiles and a lot of fun. But for them, or Lagos, sorry. But for the most part, like, I don't think we had bad service. We just had weird service. And I think part of it has to do with the language barrier. And part of it is I guess sometimes people are just rude. And we're not used to that here. So for example, if you're walking in a crowded area, what do you say if you are trying to walk past someone and you bump into them? Say, excuse me. Or sorry, excuse me. They don't say shit. They just bump and keep going. And they don't throw their shoulder at you, as to start a fight. But that's one thing that we noticed throughout this entire trip, except for the fact that if they said, excuse me, or I'm sorry, or something that sounded like that, you could tell they probably weren't from the area. They were probably a tourist just like us. But one of the things that we did in Barcelona the first time, which was a lot of fun, is we did this thing called the Paella Club. So in the opening, I had mentioned the names Brinley, Jasmine, Bob, and Kira, Mark and his girlfriend from Dublin, Renee and Christy. So what the Paella Club is an excursion. I call it excursion. It's what do you call it? It's something an event, something, right? You pay the money and you do it. But the Paella Club, you go there and you cook paella. So you get introduced to everybody. They lock the door so everything's safe. So stragglers can't come in. And you meet the main host, the main chef, and the helper. And so we're all kind of around this big table, almost like you would do, like it's this big U with a main giant kitchen in the middle. Based on our dietary needs, that's where they sat us. So Yvette, she can't do dairy. And so we had one of the vegan paellas, and the couple next to us did a vegan paella. And then there was a squid ink, and there was seafood, and there was chicken. I think there was another one, sausage maybe, I don't know. But they just serve you like these endless glasses of cava. And cava is a sparkling, kind of a sweet wine that they make in Spain. It's really good. So we were drinking cava the whole time. and they had the music coming on. You guys actually, if you follow me on social media, you may have seen that reel of us kind of dancing and making paella and having fun. And I usually don't let myself get recorded doing that because I can't dance, but hey, do it for the gram, do it for the TikTok. But we met all those people there, and we had a lot of fun. So you make the paella, you bake it, you drink, you sit at this table and you eat it, and you drink some more. And then we all decided to go out afterwards and hang out with that entire group. Let me talk about Jose Cuervo Gold. You guys know I'm a drink snob. I'll drink almost anything. And I guess at the end of the day, I would do a shot of Jose Cuervo Gold. I just won't drink it all night. But these guys were in love with it. Like, shot? No thanks. Shot again? Shot again? But we had a blast. We went to the club. Oh, by the way, I got Will Smith again. So that was Renee and Christy. One of them said I look like Will Smith. And I forgot. I think Renee, right? Renee, you're the other one. She said I look like Blair Underwood, which I'll take. Even my wife was like, oh yeah, I can see it. Now, Blair Underwood is a sex symbol. I don't think Will Smith's ever been, so I'll take Blair Underwood. Now, I don't think I look like either one of them. And don't go Googling it. You probably will, because you guys are freaking weird. But that night was, after Yvette and I were talking about it, and we identified that specific night at the Paella Club, and hanging out with that group of people is one of our most fun nights of the entire trip. Just because, you go with your spouse, your significant other, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, sometimes your wife and your spouse. I mean, your wife and your girlfriend. That's a joke. And you have fun, but it depends on your personality. We went on a cruise 10, 12 years ago, and we had fun, but it became even more fun once we linked up with some random other couples. And then from that point to the end of the trip, we were hanging out with like 6 to 8 other people almost all the time. And it's just more fun in a group. So I mentioned taking a side trip. This wasn't the best time of the year to go. I mean, it was warm, but it was chilly. It was a lot like Arizona in the winter, to where it might be 60, 65, and in the sun, it feels great, and you're taking off your sweater because you're burning up as long as the wind isn't blowing, because that is the cold. It was weird. Every breeze was a chilly breeze, no matter how nice it was outside. But as soon as you got in the shade, you were freezing your ass off. Like, it was cold. Like, it wasn't icicle cold, but you don't expect it. We'll just put it that way. So then we looked at the weather, and it was going to rain for like the next 4 days coming up really soon. So Yvette jumped on the app, and she started looking for places to go. And we decided to take a train ride in the middle of our Barcelona trip to a town called Valencia. And it could be Valencia. I heard someone say Valencia. I say Valencia because it's spelled like Valencia. That's how I pronounce it. So it's about a 2-hour train ride south from Barcelona to Valencia. My God, Valencia was beautiful. The thing about Valencia is, and it's a smallish town. They say it's only about 8 kilometers across, which is pretty small. What's that, like 5 miles or something? It's got a green belt. So what happened was, I don't know, a couple dozen years ago, the rivers kept flooding. And so they decided to reroute the river around the city. And so the old riverbed just grew they planted trees, and there's a bike path, and it's super green. And so you could take that all the way around the outside of the city. So I call that the green belt. We were only in Valencia for really a day and a half, about 2 days. But one of the days we had just got there, so it was in the afternoon. One of the days we had left. So we really had one full day. So what we did was we went on the app, and we did a bike tour, because it said perfect for people who aren't going to be in town long. It was about a 3-hour bike tour. And it took you to all the major spots in the area through the city. And you guys may have seen that as well. My posts on social media. If not, go and look for them. They're going to be on TikTok. You might see them on the Jhae Travels Instagram, but probably not the Jhae Pfenning one, just the Jhae Travels one. And that was amazing. But the thing about that city at night, and a lot of the cities over there in between Spain and Portugal, was all the walkways. It felt like most of the roads, they're all marble or limestone, but they're shiny. So at night, it looked like they were wet, although they were perfectly dry. And you're walking everywhere. It's just the visual differences are so hard to compare to anything in the United States. Because we have our big, huge cities here, and they're really nice. Obviously Chicago, LA, Phoenix is really nice, Miami, New York City. They're all uniquely nice, but they just don't have that same feel as some of the nice cities in the other side of the world that we've been to, at least, or that I've been to. We're walking around Valencia and we go to the rooftop bar, and it's just the most amazing thing. So we're in Valencia for a few days, and then we take the train back to Barcelona, and it's raining. It's raining in Valencia when we leave, and it's just pouring down in Barcelona. Pouring down. So that night we decided to stay in, do some laundry. Again, that machine sucked. We washed clothes for, God, I don't know, 4 hours or so, and it was just one load. We just couldn't get to dry. Actually, longer than 4 hours. But we decided, because there was like a storm warning, to stay in our little neighborhood. So all the restaurants that we wanted to go to that were still open were 15, 20-minute walk, which isn't much. Like, you don't mind walking when you're over there. And if it's a 30-minute walk and you're running late, then you call a cab or an Uber. Which, by the way, I'm going to talk about cabs and Ubers in just a second, because it's different. It's cheaper when you start thinking about it, although we probably charged $250 worth of cabs and Ubers on our trip in 3 weeks, but it's cheaper, but it's different. So we wash our clothes. We end up going to a local bar, a really nice bar. There was really nobody else in there. I think everyone was kind of worried about the storm. So we go in there and we have our food. We get back to the house. We have some drinks. We get back to the house. I order Popeyes. I'm going to admit it. I said I didn't want to talk about it on social media, but I don't mind admitting it to you guys. We ordered Popeyes. It was good. We got the spicy. It was a different type of spice. It was better. The chicken was probably cleaner than anything we have here in the States, because they don't really use a lot of preservatives overseas. In fact, some of the crap that we use here is illegal. As an example, Flamin' Hot Cheetos. At some point in this trip, I think when we went to Lisbon, I bought a bag of Flamin' Hot Cheetos. But I knew, because of all the news lately, that they probably wouldn't taste the same. The bag was a little different, but it was still called Flaming Hot. I want to say it was a purple bag instead of a red bag. Wasn't really spicy at all. Kind of tastes like some sort of like Spanish chilies. Nothing like ours, because it's banned in Europe. It's banned in Europe because it has red 40 and God knows what else is in it. But we were eating that shit here. Like, I've been eating Flamin' Hot Cheetos since the mid to late 90s, and I'm not dead yet. Maybe I'll die earlier. Maybe it took 10 years off my life. Maybe I don't care because it tastes so good. Let's talk about the Ubers really quick. So when you're trying to get an Uber there, specific to Barcelona, according to one of our drivers, because we were late for one of our excursions, and I haven't even talked about any of that stuff, and I will in a second, I promise. The app just cycles and cycles and cycles. And the taxi company basically runs that area. So now when you go to call an Uber, the taxi service pops up as one of your options. So you have Comfort, you have XL, you have like Uber Black, and Uber Taxi. So if you call a taxi, they come a lot quicker than a regular Uber, but not all the time. So it's kind of a weird pain. But one thing that we noticed about their Ubers, when you got a proper Uber, is they would always show up. We had several Audi A6s, a couple BMWs. This is over the course of the whole trip. Mercedes, some Teslas. Then we had some other car manufacturers that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But the thing is that the drivers always were dressed up. Like, they came, and it wasn't expensive suits. I know a cheap suit when I see one, but it doesn't matter. I have some cheap suits in the closet, so I'm not judging. But they show up, and they rush to open the door, and they take off their sports coat and fold it up nicely and put it in the car sometimes. And it just felt different. It's almost like getting your private, like a short limo where you have your own butler or driver. We don't get that shit in the States. People are going to show up in their sweats and their hair rolls, right? But when it comes to the taxis weren't all dressed up, but they have priority in Barcelona. And so if you want to make sure you get somewhere, especially in Barcelona, you want to call that thing well in advance. Ask us how we know. One of the excursions we did in Barcelona that we kind of messed up on the first part of this trip, this was before we went to Valencia. So one of the excursions that we did, well, we screwed up on one of them already. We set it for the day that we got to Barcelona the first time. And I think we fell asleep or blew past it or just somehow just forgot it. So that's money that we wasted. So if you travel overseas, don't make an excursion for the first day. Make sure it's the next day just in case. Because you just we just blanked on it. We just completely blanked on it. But one of the ones that we did that we kind of screwed ourselves on because of the taxi situation / Uber was Antoni Gaudi is a very famous architect over in Europe. Specifically, there's like 13 iconic things that he had to do with. La Sagrada Familia is this giant church, this huge ornate church, which is a little controversial because he designed it, then he died, and then somebody else took over and kind of dedicated it to his work. And it's a very modern Catholic church with a lot of things that traditional Catholics probably wouldn't appreciate or like as much. And they've been working on this thing for, 100 years, and they're going to work on it for the next 20 or 30 years before it's even done. So this thing's been a work in progress. But at the same time, it's also one of the biggest tourist attractions, if not the biggest tourist attraction in Barcelona. But he also did this park, this gardens called Park Güell, Guell, or something like that. So part of our excursion was to do the Park Güell, but I know I'll probably butcher the name. And then after that, go to La Sagrada Familia. And I think it was $150 each. So we get in our Uber, we underestimate the time to get there, and we're late. And so they can't wait for us. So the tour guide and the group go in, and one of the options that our customer service person said was, well, you can buy a ticket and meet up with them inside, except for this place is sold out. So we had no options. So we were walking around for a while, then we found a nice place that had mussels, some wine, and then we met up with them and went to this Sagrada Familia. And anyone's going to tell you anytime you go to Barcelona, this is mandatory. The gardens that we didn't go to and La Sagrada Familia, it's mandatory. I'm going to tell you it is mandatory. And I like, some of you like kind of choosing your own adventure. Yvette and I, we prefer, maybe because we're getting old, we prefer to do these with a guide because they're going to tell you more than you're ever going to be able to find out on your own. I mean, that's what they're paid to do. They're paid to know all the cool stuff around there. Always. And then so if you do these excursions and these events and there's things you want to go back to, then you go and do it on your own. But I would suggest 10 times out of 10, if you're new to an area and if you have the time and if you can afford it, because if there's one or two of you, that's one thing. But if there's like 4 or 5 of you with a family, it can get very expensive very quick. Plus, everybody who's going has to be dialed in. So if you have little kids and you know they're not going to care about it, then you have to deal with that situation. And most of the stuff that we went on, it was just adults. So I don't know if it said adults only. I don't know because Yvette booked like almost all of them, if not all of them. But we went to that, and that thing was fantastic. But we also ended up going to, on our last leg, this house that I'm going to get into that in a little bit. Let's talk about what we ate while we were in Barcelona, because I kind of skipped through a lot of stuff. Obviously, we had paella. Almost everywhere you go to, like the Spanish food, Spanish food, they're really big on tapas, which are the small shareable plates. You all probably know what that is. Almost everybody has tapas on their menu, and almost everyone has the same stuff on their menu. So it can be a little annoying if you're trying to get something different, but then you don't want to get something too different because you're in Spain. You want to get what they have. So it's always beneficial to get the name of a few restaurants or spend some time looking or ask some of the locals, where should we go? Their beers, Estrella Damm, Damm. I posted about that. I had an Estrella Damm. Not a lot of liquor there, like brown liquor, Western liquor. Almost everywhere we went had maybe Macallan, Jack Daniels, Johnny Walker Black, Johnny Walker Red. No one drinks Johnny Walker Red. Nobody. Variances of wines, things like vermouth, things of that. So we went to this place called La Flauta, and the kids sitting next to us, I call them kids, because I guess you don't have to be of legal age to drink there. You could probably order a beer if you're 13. I think so. But they look young. But the older you get, the younger other people look. So they could have been in their early 20s or late teens. But we noticed that they were putting lemon in their Coca-Cola. So we had sat outside, and they were smoking, because you could smoke there. There weren't as many smokers as we thought there would be, but after a while, you just accept it. When you're sitting down, you don't want to sit next to a table of smokers, but just know that there's somebody around you who can light up a cigarette at any given time, and they're well within their right. You just have to suck it up and deal with it. But these kids sitting next to us at La Flauta had these cigarette vape things. So they look like vapes, but they had like cigarettes in them. So tell me, have you guys ever seen that before? This is the only time I've seen it. I saw it on the entire trip. Everybody else was just smoking like a traditional cigarette. One of the things about Barcelona, let me describe to you, is, all the cars, we're going to talk about cars here coming up in a minute. But some of the other things that I noticed while we were there is it's a very clean city. They probably wish it was more clean, but make no mistake, it's a lot cleaner than pretty much all of our major cities. And it's accomplished because it feels like every 50 to 100 meters, especially in busy areas, they have trash bins. There's big, big trash bins, like 3 to 5 of them. They're all plastic. They're different color coded. And they're just running trash like all day, picking this stuff up. So that means there's no trash bins on this. There's no bags of trash anywhere. There's no such thing as an overflown small trash can because there's hardly any of them anywhere. There's these big trash bins. And that's all over, whether we were in Barcelona or even when we were in Portugal. Like, I don't know, did Portugal have the trash bins? Maybe Portugal didn't have the trash bins where we're at in Lisbon. But there still wasn't trash everywhere. It's like they pride themselves on trying to be clean. Now, if it's after, the rain or super windy or craziness area, then you're going to see some trash out and about. But in general, I was just kind of blown away about, because we have dumpsters here in the United States. And the dumpsters are always in the alleyway or behind a building. And these were all curbside. But because of the way they looked, it wasn't an eyesore. And I think I have a photo I'm going to show you guys. Maybe I'll post a lot of the stuff I'm talking about. I'm probably going to post some of it on social media. Probably a lot more of it on the Patreon. So there's a plug, patreon.com, Hard Parking Podcast. Let's take a step back. I talked about Valencia a little bit, but one thing I have to tell you guys is it's not a very big city. It's only about 8 kilometers across. We took the train from Barcelona to Valencia. Now in Valencia, it was beautiful because there was marble everywhere. So it looked wet at night. It was one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been to because of that. We did a bike tour. Okay, so let's go to Portugal. So we flew from Barcelona to Portugal. This was after we went to Valencia and back to Barcelona. So this is the next big part of our trip. So Barcelona to Lisbon, Portugal. Portugal was different. One thing we noticed, and it's because of the neighboring countries, they have some sort of a traveler's agreement, that if you're flying back and forth from Barcelona to Portugal, it's one deal. If you're flying into Barcelona, and I believe if you're flying into Portugal from outside of the immediate countries, it's a little different deal. And what I mean is there was no customs at Portugal. So when we got off the plane, the thought was we'd have to go stand in line to do the customs declaration, get the little stamp, how long are you here? What are you doing? Which actually they didn't ask that in Spain either. You just went to the line and they kind of looked to make sure you are the person that's on your passport. Didn't ask you any questions, just stamped it and moved to the next person. Portugal, though, there was 2 lines. One if you have nothing to declare, and one if you have something to declare. How many people do you think declared anything? Right. I didn't see anybody go on that side because nobody wants to deal with it. So we get to Lisbon, beautiful. I actually have a rock from Lisbon, the sidewalks. And Yvette's like, you're stealing from the country, da 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 da. Every place you walked, all the sidewalks, the streets, they're all made of these little, I think they're limestone. They have little quartz in them. And at night, they look like they're wet. And so, like Lisbon, where we stayed, kind of because Lisbon's big, and we didn't realize that till kind of the end of the Lisbon trip. But where we stayed, it was a really popular touristy spot, of course. It's where the trains are. And when you go to Lisbon, people say these are the 5 things you have to do. We were kind of staying in that general area where everything's kind of popping. A lot of walking, but the sidewalks, the streets are all made of this little rock. And so I found a few spots where the rocks was all broken up. And so I grabbed one, and I grabbed a smaller one as I continued on our walking path. And these super narrow, they feel like they're creepy, crazy alleyways, but that's just where everyone walks and drives too. By the way, I would hate to drive. I think driving in Lagos versus driving in Lisbon, I would hate to drive in Lisbon. Because Lagos, there's only a few parts where you would ever have to just issue. Normally, it's so small, you would just park in a 24-hour parking, which we did. It was a paid 24-hour parking. There were some free ones. I didn't want to look for them because then I would never find the house. But that was $10 a day, so we were there for 3 days. It was worth it, $30. Easy. You park the car when you get there, and then you take the car out and you leave. Lisbon, a lot of cars in the city. there's no way in hell I would ever own a car or drive a car there. A lot of 20, 30, 40 degree inclines and declines, a lot of sharp corners spanning for blocks. It's not just like one little area like when we went to Lagos, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But we went out to eat at a really nice place called Rocco, R-O-C-C-O. Friends suggested that place. And this isn't an ad for American Express, but, I said we got the American Express Platinum card to travel with, and they have a concierge service. So what happens is when you call the concierge service, places that you can't get reservations to that are sold out, a lot of times the concierge can get you in there. So that's what we ended up doing for 2 of the restaurants while we were in Lisbon. Because I didn't plan ahead of time, of course. And so everybody on social media says, you have to go here, here, and here. But then when you go to book those reservations, it's like, oh, well, they're sold out except for this really crappy time slot over here, or this day that we're not going to be there. Speaking of time slots, the way they do their food there in Spain and I guess Portugal, but is they have breakfast time, then there's an hour or two off, then they have lunch time, and lunch is considered from like 1 to 4 in the afternoon, and then they're closed, and then they open up again at 7 or 8, and we're open until 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. So over there, they eat dinner late. Like the average dinner time, I think, is 9:30 p.m. We're over here, that's a late night snack almost. And so planning that, spreading across your planning your food and your drinks throughout the course of a day was, it's one of those small differences because Europe's different. We did Rocco. We did a couple tours. We did a food and wine tour, and that was very educational. Ate this stuff called bifanas, B-I-F-A-N-A-S. It's a pork sandwich. It's slowly cooked throughout the course of, hours, and it's one of the most delicious things. And our tour guide, Philip A., he said that's like their fast food. So you go to a place that sells bifana, you get a bifana sandwich, it's on a bun, almost like a burger bun, but better, I guess. And the sauce you put on it is peri peri, which is a really spicy sauce. So it's an African sauce. Or they have a mustard, but the mustard is cut with beer. So it's like a beer mustard. And it's the most delicious. One of the most delicious things we ate, while we were in Europe. We had a funny dining experience in Lisbon. We went to a place called Ribadora, and we're sitting at our table. And this is, earlier I had mentioned kind of the different mannerisms with service. And so we sat down and so first off, they had this really cool looking seafood thing on the menu, on the website. And I go, hey, what item is this? Because nothing I was looking at on the menu looked like this plate, which is the reason why I wanted to go to this place. And the server's like, oh, that's just a combination of all the rest of our stuff on a plate for presentation. I'm like, you can't do that. Like here, if you go to a place and they got pictures of food on the menu, and I guess there's not, so we're talking Chili's and Fridays, because no nice restaurants can have pictures of their food on their menu. But even looking online, so if you go to Mastro's Steakhouse, and we have Mastro's all around the U.S., Mastro's City Hall, Mastro's Ocean Club, Mastro's Steakhouse, Steak 44, Steak 48, there's obviously pictures. But if you look online, you're not going to see something you can't actually order. So I was felt a little hoodwinked on this one. I go, okay, well, I don't know what I want. Yvette's like, I don't know what I want. And the guy's like, oh, you want this? You like shrimp? Yes, we like shrimp. Do you like clams, mussels? Yes, we like mussels. Okay, that's what you're going to get. And so he kind of forced our menu item, which is fine. So we're sitting there and we're kind of drinking our drinks and waiting for our food. And a server comes up. He presents a bottle of wine and starts cutting the top off and pouring. I'm like, oh, wow, we get this must be complimentary wine. But I'm looking behind Yvette. There's another couple at another table, and the woman is kind of looking at me and looking at the server like, I think, what the? So what happened was the server was bringing us somebody else's wine, which is hilarious, by the way. We didn't drink the wine. We could have, but we didn't drink it. But it was, the look on the girl's face was priceless. So I go, okay, well, let me order a martini. And my server goes, martini? We don't make drinks here. I don't know how to make a martini. I'm sitting there like, this is a nice seafood place. I'm looking up on the wall and they have the vodkas and some of the gins, and you don't know how to make a martini, which made me think this place was like a big mafia front. They serve the food. It's not that busy. Somehow they're in a prime location and they don't know how to make a basic drink. Like a martini, if you guys don't know how to make a martini, it's either vodka or gin. If it's a dry martini, it's got a little bit of dry vermouth, and that's it. and you could garnish it with an olive, a lemon, the lemon peel. And if you get a dirty martini, it's the vodka or gin, a little bit of olive juice to make it dirty, and then olives. So that's it. And a little bit of vermouth, like a very tiny bit of dry vermouth. A tiny bit. So much where you pour it in the shot glass, you swish it around, you pour it, and then you dump it out of the shot glass, and then whatever's left in the shot glass, you put that in your martini. And that's how you make a martini, shaken or stirred. So this guy ends up bringing me just this giant glass of gin, and that was my martini. I think it was a giant glass of gin, and it had like an olive in it. And that was it. That was my martini. So Yvette and I kind of looked at that and kind of laughed a little bit. We ended up taking a tour bus in Lisbon to go look at the bigger stuff, a castle. It's a famous castle in the city Sintra, and the castle is yellow and red. And so if you're ever there, that's one of those things you have to do when you go there. It's one of those can't miss tourist attractions. Did lunch in Cascais. So here's one of the deals, or let's talk about Lisbon. In Lisbon, if you see a yellow building, if you see a green building, if you see a blue building, it's all tile, not paint. As you get up to it, they're just a bunch of tiles. Whether they're 1x1 tiles, 2x2, whether they're your traditional, what I would consider bathroom tile in like a public restroom, or the tile you would have a decorative, like a ring of tile around a swimming pool. That's the exterior of like 90% of the buildings in Portugal look like that. And it's kind of awesome, really. Backsplash. Think of your favorite backsplash. Now think of that backsplash on the exterior of a building. And that's it. Like the whole thing is that. City walls, they're all mosaic tiles. We went to the aquarium. Apparently, it's one of the top 3 aquariums in the world. There were a couple speakeasies. Once we got done with Lisbon, as I said earlier, that's when we decided to go to Lagos. Went to the airport, picked up the rental car. Let's talk about Lagos. Lagos was beautiful. So the official food in Portugal is sardines, and I finally got my sardines at a place called El Charco in Lagos. And the sardines, they're different than you would think. They have like a special grill grate for sardines, and they're big. They're big-ish. They're not these little tiny things shoved into a can. But they have the sardine season and the sardine off season. And the sardine season had just started toward the end of our trip. But going to Lagos, it was a shit show trying to find the Airbnb and park temporarily to empty the suitcase. And then, of course, that's when I found the 24-hour paid parking. But Lagos is beautiful. Our Airbnb was right there by all the good stuff. We did excursions. We did a boat excursion. It took us to these caves. We saw dolphins. We intercepted I think there's a dolphin excursion you could take where that's specifically, it's like going whale watching when you go on vacation. It's cool, but it's not cool, but then it's cool at the same time. So our boat, it took a detour and met up with one of the dolphin boats, and their dolphins were right there. They probably swam within 8 feet of our boat. So I got some good video of that with my iPhone. And then we went to these caves, and they're beautiful cutaway caves on the side of the cliffs, and the water, kind of goes in. And then if you look up, there's a big hole in the ceiling, and it shines down onto a beach, and it's one of the most beautiful things you're ever going to see your entire life. We stayed in the boat. We didn't go swimming at that part because that wasn't part of our excursion, but there were people who had kayaked and were hanging out on this really small beach that was only lit by the sunlight coming down from the top. So there's certain times of the day where you probably couldn't see anything in that cave because in that little cutaway, because of the fact that the sun's not directly over you. But that was a great time. And then I went hiking while I hung out at the beach, and I went to some of these spots that I saw on the map and saw some of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Now, I took probably 1,000 photos on this trip, and it's because we have a commitment to take the photos in a raw format and then have me edit them and then put them up on the wall at our house. And so she's always pressuring me to get more photos, but then it's up to her to pick the photos. And right now we have 0 of these things on the wall in the house. So you know where that delay is, and it's not from me. Europe's different, just different enough. It's the small differences. I got 2 stories I have for you guys today. One involves our rental car, and then one involves toothpaste. So I'm going to go into the toothpaste. But first, before I go any further, I am holding up a hard parking coaster. If this is your first time listening to it or watching this, if you want this coaster, I have plenty of them. I will give one to you for free. Email me, hardparkingpodcast@gmail.com. You are not joining a mailing list. You can if you want to go to hardparkingpod.com, but it's not necessary. So just shoot me an email, Let me know you want one. I will drop this in the mail. I need your mailing address, obviously, but it's yours. So, with that being said, so we're traveling and we have, my wife and I, we have the little traveler size toothpaste, the little ones that you get at Walmart in the travel section, as well as your local Walgreens or CVS or whatever. And I'm watching these things get smaller and smaller and smaller because we don't go out and buy a new one every single time we go on vacation. We like to use the ones we have. And my wife likes to squeeze the shit out of those little containers. So I'm watching the level of these things get lower and lower. And so we get to Lagos, which is the third part of our trip. Lagos is beautiful, by the way. I don't want to get too off track here, but Lagos is beautiful. So we're walking around Lagos and said, hey, we need body wash because a lot of times when you stay in Airbnbs, they provide it, but sometimes they don't. We have our own, except for we were almost out. And the hotel usually has it as well, but we were staying in an Airbnb. Our body wash situation was getting low. And so we go, no problem. There's a supermarket at every 400 feet or so. And then there's a pharmacy. There's pharmacies everywhere outside the United States. I guess we have them here too, but they're not as close. So we go to the grocery store and we don't really find what we want. I think we found the body wash there. $6. Like $6 for a little thing of body wash. Not too little, but I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 ounces. But we still need toothpaste. And we didn't see any at the first supermarket we went to. And by the way, supermarket, they're not really super. They're really small. We're talking 20 feet by 14 feet, living room size. So we go to the pharmacy. Pharmacy's right down the street from the house that we're staying at. We're talking 50 meters or so. So we go in there and we look. And so we're in Portugal. Okay, my wife's Puerto Rican. And I keep forgetting that Puerto Rican Spanish and Portuguese is not the same. It sounds the same to the untrained ear, just like Mexican music. You think sounds the same as Puerto Rican music. It's completely different. But to the untrained ear, it's all the same. So we walk in and we look and we see the toothbrushes. We see small toothpaste. We see the big toothpaste. Start looking at the prices. Now, granted, we're at a pharmacy, and so you look at it and you go, well, my God, this is expensive. So you get the big thing of Sensodyne, or their version of Sensodyne, and there's this other thing that comes in a 2-pack. I'm like, we don't need all of this. And the reason why it's big is because they know 80% of the people who walk into this establishment are going to be travelers who don't need all that. So you might as well milk them for their money. So we decide, okay, you have the toothbrushes, the small ones, the small canisters of paste, and the big canisters of paste. So we grab one of the smaller ones. Looking at it, okay, there's teeth on there, whatnot. Don't recognize the brand. They didn't have Colgate at this place. They didn't have Close Up or whatever these other ones are. Aqua Fresh. They had whatever they were. Medical names, which meant they were going to cost more. So we ended up picking up a tube. So we buy that small tube, and that night we're at the Airbnb, and my wife's already gone to bed. She used the last little part of the previous toothpaste. So I'm looking at this box. I'm looking at it. Okay, cool, teeth, whatever. Open it up, and it's like, oh, this is kind of a weird looking nozzle, whatever. Take the nozzle off, put out the toothpaste. I look at the toothpaste. I go, oh, it's kind of a weird looking toothpaste, a little translucent and brown, but they do things different. Things are different in Europe. So I wet the toothbrush. You guys do that? You wet the toothbrush, then you put the paste on there. So I wet the toothbrush, had the paste on there, started brushing my teeth. I'm going in. I'm just sitting there waiting. Kind of a weird taste, but waiting for this thing to foam, right? Because toothpaste is supposed to be foaming. You're supposed to fall out of your mouth. It goes all over the place. And I don't get the same grit, and I never get the foam. And I start looking at the box, and this was some sort of denture paste, denture something. My mouth is all sticky. So now I'm sticking my fingers all up in my mouth, trying to pull it all out of there. And it probably took me 10 minutes to get all that shit out of my mouth. And I realized that's what it is. It's some sort of a denture gel. Not glue, but some sort of a gel to prevent food from getting in places it shouldn't get. So yeah, Europe is just a little different. And of course, the next day we go shopping, and I see a little thing of Colgate on the shelf. When we're in Lagos, we need another suitcase. We end up buying a yellow one, something that stands out, because we just had too much stuff. Between the 7 bottles of liquor that I ended up buying, some of them in duty free, and just the extra stuff that we had bought, plus we were almost overweight going over there. We needed that third suitcase. Speaking of liquor, the liquor in Portugal was different than the liquor in Spain. Portugal has this stuff called Madrona, aka firewater. And so that's like their official drink. And I don't know if you can buy that outside. It's almost like a legal and a legal, not illegal, a legal moonshine. It's kind of brandy based. So there's different ways to make it or different ways to process it. So we went to the liquor store. One of the guys like, this is the one I suggest. I know we have like 6 or 7 of them, but this is the one I would suggest that you buy. So I bought that. In Portugal, in Lisbon, specifically, they have this drink called ginja, which is spelled like gin, like the gin you drink, G-I-N, and then ja, like ninja, but it's ginja. There's 2 of them. The one that we bought, it was a cherry-based liqueur. It's about 40 proof, and there's a bunch of cherries in there. But it's like one of those deals where I don't know if you can buy it outside, and I like to buy stuff that you can't typically find outside of wherever it is I'm going. So we bought a couple bottles of ginja, one for my son and one for me. But then, of course, duty-free, we bought a bunch of stuff at the duty-free shop as well, getting out of there. Got done with Lagos, went back to Barcelona, stayed at the Renaissance Hotel in a major business district, and this part was completely different than the first part of Barcelona. This felt more big city, felt more touristy. Because in the first part, again, we were somewhere where I think maybe 80% of the people that were around us actually lived there, versus the second part where we stayed at the Renaissance and went to the bigger beach. That was probably 80% of the people were tourists, if not 90% of the people around us were tourists, not necessarily from America, but just from all around. A lot of English speaking, whether like UK English or whatever. But one of the things we did do is we went back. We did a tour of it's called Casa Batlló, Batlló. I probably pronounced that wrong, but it was an Antoni Gaudí. I talked about him earlier. An Antoni Gaudí house that he was paid to kind of remodel, and it's this super weird house, super eccentric house. If I could describe it, I would say that if they made a house in the real world that might have Alice in Wonderland living there, this would be the house. So you do the tour, and it's worth it too. I think it's like $20-$30 each. But if you do the gold tour, which is like an extra $10, they give you a headphone and they give you like this tablet. It's not an iPad, but it's kind of like a mini tablet. And when you go into each room, there's a number on an icon. So if you press the corresponding number on your tablet, then it's like this VR experience. So when you hold it up and kind of scan around the room, you could see what that room would have looked like back in, I don't know when it was, early 1900s or 1880 something or whatever it was, which is cool because a lot of this house was inspired by nature. So the stained window, if you look at it through your tablet, all of a sudden like a sea turtle comes off of it and swims over to the next window and then goes into the window. Or, the big column up the middle of the house, if you look at it through this tablet, you could see like jellyfish and things like that. So it was a really cool interactive thing. Went to this room at the very end of it called the Cube. And in the Cube, this is the very last part of the tour, but in the Cube, everything like the floor, the ceiling, the walls, the columns, every square inch of this cube was a screen. When you first walk in there, it just looks like glass. Glass or mirrors. It's just like a bunch of mirrors. But when they turn it on, you're just in this huge psychedelic room, and you're underneath your feet and on the walls. You have all these colors and these graphics, and there's probably 50 to 100 people in this room, and it was one of the more cool things I've ever seen. I think it was kind of an expression of the house, and from what we understood, Gaudi didn't get to see the house finished either. The same Japanese architect that took over for the church, the Sagrada Familia, also took over for the house. So he must have just followed in all his Gaudi's footsteps and finished out all his projects, or working on finishing them out. So it was really neat to see. One of the things about this trip, before I talk about the movies that I watched on the airplane, is contactless payment everywhere. Whether it was in Spain or Portugal, everybody had the little machine and you just tap it. So you needed the tap device, or you could insert your credit card. But this was everywhere. And of course, when you check out, they ask you if you want euro or US dollars. And we were told to always pick euro. So we always pick euro. And it's because of the exchange rate and the fees. So our credit cards we use had no foreign transaction fees, but you would still rather use something over there in their currency than have to pay the currency exchange difference plus the heavy fees from your US bank. So you always pick euro when you're over there. But if everywhere had contactless payments except the gas stations. Barcelona is overrun with mopeds, and they have specific lanes. In fact, the first guy who picked us up from the airport and took us in his Uber is born and raised in the area, and he was saying that because of their infrastructure and the mass growth of Barcelona, they're starting to take away traditional car lanes and turn them into bike lanes and moped lanes. And it's crazy because when you're riding in the car, in the Uber, and you're looking around, the motorcycles are flying up in between you, the mopeds, just like you see in California and parts of Arizona, but it's everywhere. So you have to keep your head on a swivel. And I don't think that's unlike other parts of Europe. Some of the places we've been to, even in the Caribbean, near the United States, it's just total pandemonium driving around on these streets. Sometimes they have no lanes. It's just this big, giant piece of tarmac, and cars somehow are able to navigate themselves, lay on their horn, hardly any accidents. In fact, I didn't think I saw one accident the whole time we were there with how crazy the traffic is. But you have the bicycles, the mopeds, taxis have their own lane in the busier parts of Barcelona, along with a bus lane, because it's not unlike, when you travel, sometimes the buses have their own lane, and so they don't get stuck in traffic, but taxis are the same way. So if you call an Uber taxi, then, like I said earlier, they get first priority, but you call an Uber taxi, and it's kind of like going through the fast lane, even in rush hour traffic. But the vehicles. I'm a car nerd, obviously, and I think my wife was getting kind of impatient with me over the course of this trip, because every time I saw a vehicle that I hadn't seen before, I took a photo of it. I took note of the vehicle manufacturer. Early on, I was taking notes of the actual models. Toward the end of the trip, I stopped doing that because my list of vehicles that I saw became 20, 30, 40 long. And so I'm thinking, well, that's a lot to go over. But I would say that over in Portugal and Spain, which they're neighboring countries, but they're a little bit different, even with their cars, is you have a lot of Citroens, a lot of Renaults, which we probably read that as Renault, but it's Renault. There's Fiat, which reads like seat, S-E-A-T. There's Fiats everywhere. There's Opels everywhere. And Dacia, as I researched, is it's by Renault, so it's one of their brands. But other than that, there's hardly any Hondas over there. They are there, but they're few and far. And I think I saw maybe a handful of modern Honda Civics, if that. Most of them were older, 2 or 3 or 4 generations old, a couple CRVs or HRVs. But other than that, you hardly saw any Hondas. Fords over there, but most of the Fords that I saw were Ford Pumas. You can Google those. They're kind of cool. It's weird that some other parts of the world get cars that we don't get here in the United States, but I understand why, because I don't know if the Ford Puma would sell here. We're kind of getting to that smaller car. And speaking of smaller cars, 90% of the cars over there, if you were to take a sample, not a sample of 10, but a sample of, say, 100 vehicles, 90 to 92% of these vehicles are hatchbacks or wagons. They don't have any traditional trunk sedans. So if you take a look at like a Toyota Camry that we see here every day on every road, they don't look like that over there. The Toyota Camrys over there look like little SUVs. Not even wagons, but literally look like little SUVs. They have Kia. They have a Kia Picanto, a few other Kia models. They don't have our Kia models. They have their own. Hyundai, a lot of Hyundai models that you don't recognize, but they do have. I did see a Hyundai Veloster. No, the Hyundai Elantra N. I saw one of those out. And I saw in one of the dealerships downtown that they had a few other Hyundais that we'd have over here. One of the other cars that I saw was a Toyota CHR, and I thought it was familiar, but it just looked different. It looked really cool. There's a lot of Toyota CHRs over there. Exotic colors, too, like really cool, almost McLaren colors. Then I researched when I got back here, and we had that car in the United States, but they discontinued it, I think, in 2022. But in 2024, they still have them over there, and they look better. I guess the best way I can compare it is you take your traditional Prius, and then they just recently, within the last year or two, came out with a new Prius that looks 10 times better than the old Prius. It's still a Prius, but it looks good. And I would say that the new CHR is a lot more similar to the previous one, but it just, the little things that they changed looks really good. Teslas, where we were at, whether it was in Portugal or Spain, there's not a lot of Teslas on the road. They still have them. They have the Tesla, let's see, Model Y. They have the Tesla Model 3 and the Model X. Most of the time when we saw them, they were used for Ubers. I had one or two taxi cabs that were Teslas, but they weren't as often as, so like here in Gilbert, Arizona, or even, I guess, on a larger scale, Phoenix, if you count 50 cars in traffic, 35 of them might be Teslas. No lie. Maybe 40 sometimes, maybe 15, depending on where you are in the area. Over there, again, taking a 100-car sample, 7 of them might be Teslas, depending on where you're at. It's amazing. But I'm going to run down, again, Citroen is a big one. Like I said, Fiat, there's a few Volkswagens out there. They have one called a T-Roc. There's a company called Micro Car. You guys can look these up. Skoda, Skoda. Skoda is a car that's all over the place over there. Peugeot is all over the place over there. There's a ton of Peugeots. Peugeot is what it is. We look at it as Peugeot or Peugeot. Peugeot, but it's Peugeot. Cupra, Cupra. I looked that up. That's actually a high performance manufacturer of Fiat. Again, the one that says seat. So there's Cupras everywhere. Dacia, like I said. I already said that. I saw a Hyundai Staria in a dealership. Staria. I don't think we have those here. It looks like an EV minivan. Looks pretty cool, actually. 4-door smart cars. We don't have those here. And at first, I wasn't really seeing that many, but as we continued on our trip, we started to see more and more and more smart cars, and it makes sense. Like I said before, we went to Italy. These cars are parked on the sidewalk. These cars are parked everywhere. They're not just the smart cars. There's a bunch of other cars that are the same size of a smart car that we've never seen over here. Some of them are full EV, some of them hybrid, some of them are internal combustion, and they're all tiny. Something called a Vela, a Ligier car, Ligier. It's the size of a 2-passenger smart car. That's a really cool car. We saw that in Barcelona. One of the things we noticed, though, is not a lot of flashy vehicles, not a lot of modified vehicles. I believe there's a noise ordinance in Barcelona, so you wouldn't go over there with a modified exhaust. You'd probably get pulled over really quick. We did see a couple of Mustangs, like 5.0 Mustangs, all within the past 20 years of production. Not a lot of them. Obviously, you wouldn't expect to see a lot of them. I did see a few modern Porsches. I saw a GT2 once in Valencia, which was really nice. A couple Ferraris, not as many as you would think. And where we were staying, it didn't really make any sense anyway. The first part of Barcelona, because of the way the roads were, where we stayed in Lisbon, it made absolutely no sense. I would never drive on those roads with a nice car. As a car guy, I keep thinking like, oh, would I take my NSX on this? Or this would be a cool street to cruise down, have everyone look at you while you're cruising the strip. No. Most of the place we were at, no way in hell. I would screw my car up on every curb, every incline, a blind corner, might run over a few people. It just doesn't make any sense. You need something really small over there. And because of that, no pickup trucks. Hardly. Yeah, so there's hardly any pickup trucks. I would say on the entire trip, I saw maybe 5 or 6, 3 of which were totally utilitarian, and maybe 1 or 2 were kind of stylish, like you would see here. But there's nowhere to park them, especially in Barcelona. Now, Barcelona, which we found out the second time we went back, at the very last part of the trip, there was a whole other side of that city that has normal-sized roads and more normal-sized cars. But still, they're wagons and hatchbacks and SUVs, but they're tiny SUVs. There's no such thing over there as something like a Lincoln Navigator, Ford Expedition. There's some vehicles that are the size of like a Ford Explorer, not very many, a little bit smaller than that. And those were a lot of the Dacias, a lot of the Skodas, a lot of the Peugeots. They have SUVs, but they're smaller, probably about the size of an Audi, like a Q5. And even that's kind of large. It's weird. It's weird to imagine, right? Where everything is just that much smaller, even if their highways are a decent size in the big part of the city. But you guys want to look this up. On the side of a road, there was a silver Volkswagen truck called an Amarok, A-M-A-R-O-C, truck. About the same size as, I don't know, what's the The trucks we saw were crew cabs. So there were no like two-door traditional workhorse pickup trucks. So if you look up the Volkswagen Amarok, it's a crew cab, and it was a really good-looking vehicle. I saw one. I saw a few of the Toyota Hilux trucks, which are also crew cabs. But other than that, there was no pickup trucks. And even in the city where I was talking about all the trash cans, they had a ton of trash trucks. They were really little. They looked like mini trash trucks. Not super tiny, but they were small enough to where you can drive them through any of those roads. They were always picking up trash. And I did see a normal-sized trash truck once or twice in Barcelona. That's probably where all the little ones go and dump their trash. It's almost like a mama truck and a bunch of little baby trucks driving on the road. I swear when I was in Lagos, I saw a smart car pickup conversion. But yeah, just a ton of cars, but most of them were really small. And I'm going to post them on my social media a little bit, and I'm probably going to post a lot of them to my the Patreon. This is probably a good time to tell you guys about my rental car. I'm not going to go into a rental car review, but we ended up getting a Fiat 500. And for some reason, I thought the Fiat 500 was not the small one, but the next one up. And when we went to go pick up the car, I was wrong. It's a small one. And thank God I know how to drive a manual transmission. Thank God, because that's what it was. A little tiny 6-speed Fiat. So we get the car from a company. I'll talk about that later. But you might want to listen to that because you want to save yourself a lot of money when you travel. A good friend of mine put me onto this company. I'm going to put you on this company when I talk about that in a little bit. We get in the car and he says, hey, we're giving this to you with a quarter tank of gas. So when you return it to us, right, quarter tank of gas. Most rental companies, at least here in the States, give it to you with a full tank of gas. A lot easier to top off than it is to guesstimate. They're probably laughing all the way to the bank. So we leave the Lisbon airport and we're driving. We go to the outlet mall and we're going to drive down to Lagos. So we figured we need gas. So I pulled into a gas station and get out of the car, and the pump doesn't have a credit card system, which is super weird because Europe's different. Portugal is different. Spain is different. Although I didn't drive in Spain, but Portugal is different. So I look at the gas pump and it has €1, €5, I think €10, €25 buttons. And then it's got the pump. And it's not 91, 93 octane. It's E5, E10, diesel, and something else. So then I go to take the gas cap off. And again, I've never driven this little Fiat. And the gas lid is kind of closed. It's a little firm. I'm thinking, okay. So then my wife and I spend 3 minutes looking for the button on the inside of the car. There's a guy waiting behind us for us to get through this whole thing. And we find out on YouTube on how to open up the gas cap. You just have to pull on it extra hard. But then you have to take your key and you have to stick your key in the gas cap. But the gas cap spins. So you put the key in there. Then you hold the gas cap. Then you turn the key to where it locks. And then you can actually take the gas cap off. This whole time this guy's sitting behind us. So I get that part done. Again, no credit card machine to pay first like we do here in the States. So I don't know what I'm doing. I push the €25 button. I pumped €25 worth of gas into the car, which went by like that, super fast. $25 worth of 25 liters, not gallons, €25 worth of fuel into this vehicle. So then I go inside to pay. I'm standing in line. I get up to me. Get up to my part. I get up to the counter and there's 2 employees. So I go, hey, €25 on pump 3. I just did it, but they have no idea what I'm talking about. Their English isn't very good at that specific location. Most of the places didn't really have that problem. So I have employee 1 and employee 2 kind of talking to each other, talking to me. They go, yes, 25 on pump 3. I go, yeah. So she starts typing in. I go, no. I've paid already. I mean, I've pumped and I need to pay. I'm finished. Here's my card. I'm finished. Here's the card. So she takes the card. She goes, okay, €25 on pump 3. I go, yes. Okay. So she types into the computer. She goes, there you go. Go out there. Essentially, I'm trying to figure out what she's saying. Go out there and pump the gas. I put $25 with the euro in the account. I go, no. I've already done it. I'm finished. I need to just pay. And so she talks to the coworker. They don't know what's going on. So she goes out there with me. She goes, come, I show you. I go, okay. Walk out to the car, and I told her, I go, well, I push these buttons. I hit 25. She goes, no. Never do that. Just take the pump out, stick it in the tank, and fill up, and come inside and pay. I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, I did that already. So she grabs the pump, gives it in my hand. She goes, here, put it in there. I did that. They must think I'm a complete idiot that I don't know how to pump gas. And so I pull the trigger, and as it gets to 25, it starts slowing down. And I was thinking to myself, oh no. She thought I just prepaid 25. So it creeps up to 25. My wife's looking out of the passenger car at me, or the passenger side of the car kind of looking at me. I'm looking at her, and this lady's looking at me, looking at the pump. So when it gets to 25, she goes, okay, you're good. Just, basically put it back on there and you're done. You're all good. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. And I look at my wife, I go, you know what just happened, right? You know what just happened. We got to go. So through no fault of my own, I stole $25 of gas from this station in Lisbon. So after we got gassed up and we headed down to Lagos, we took kind of the back routes, not the main highway. And so I didn't really notice if the car had that much performance. Actually, I noticed immediately the car has no performance. But when you're going down and winding through some backcountry roads and going through these small little towns, you don't really notice as much. There was many times where I wanted to just drop the gear and pass the car in front of me. So I would drop the gear and put my foot down, and on passing lanes, you need a lot of room. Like, you might as well, if you can see the vehicle on the other side, almost no matter how far off it is, don't pass in a Fiat 500. And I was thinking, like, man, if I was in the NSX, if I was in the MDX, if I was in my 5.0 liter Infiniti FX, I would fly past this slow-ass car in front of me. Couldn't go past them in... Actually, I could probably go past them in my K truck in the garage, my little Honda Z, but not in a Fiat 500. But other than that, driving the car was kind of a breeze. The manual transmission had a really long throw to it. 6 speeds, six-speed manual transmission had a really long throw to it. It took me a while to figure out how to get it to lock into reverse. So when we were in the parking garage, first picking up the car, I would go in reverse and the car would start going forward toward the wall. And that's like, what are you doing? So it took a while to find the reverse. You pull this little collar up. It had a little sleeve on the shifter, and you kind of pull that up a little bit. And I think that either helps lock it in to reverse or helps get it out of reverse. I don't know. But I didn't love the car. It's a cute little car, but not the type of car I would ever in a million years want to personally own. Not a very dude-like car. But driving it into Lagos, you understood that it was such a small car, I couldn't imagine a bigger car. Maybe a nicer small car. But the way that the roads were in Lagos, which wasn't unlike other parts of this trip, but specifically in Lagos and Lisbon, the roads were really tight, really narrow. Think about your average alley, and then chop another foot or two off of the width of that, and that's these little hand-laid stone roads. But then imagine not being able to see more than 20 feet in front of you because they're twisty, they're super hilly, the inclines, you have to be in first gear, you're never going to make it up. The declines have blind 45-degree turns, not 90-degree turns. So if the turn was 90 degrees or greater, then your success with the turn and not missing where you're supposed to go was a lot better than if you have to do almost like a reverse, almost like a U-turn, 45 degrees back towards you. So there's a few times driving through the very narrow streets of Lagos to try to find our Airbnb. There's a few times it was super hairy. And you get to a point where you're not supposed to go there. So there's those big poles that come up in the middle of the road. So you have to reverse somehow without being able to see. But driving the car, it wasn't my favorite car. It was probably one of my least favorite cars I've ever driven. So over there, you drive on the same side of the road as you drive in the United States, which is great. So they have that familiarity. But driving back, and I haven't talked about Lagos, but driving back to Lisbon. So here's what we did. We went to Barcelona. When we got done with Barcelona, in the middle of the trip, we went to Valencia, but we didn't rent a car. We didn't have a car the whole time. We went back to Barcelona. Then we flew to Lisbon. We stayed in Lisbon for like a week. Then we went back to the Lisbon airport, picked up our rental car so we could drive the rental car down to Lagos. So that's fast tracking to this point. We got done with Lagos. We drove the rental car back to Lisbon, and then we flew back to Barcelona for another day and a half before ultimately coming home. And so driving the car from Lagos back to Lisbon was an event in itself. This time I stuck to the main highways. There were a lot more gas stations, a lot more open roads. And this thing, so it's a hybrid system. And I didn't really research on, what that meant with this car, but I experienced that it sucks. Because driving back on these long roads, everyone's flying past you. And the speed limit was like 120 kilometers an hour, so the speed limit on average was 120 kilometers an hour, which is about 75 miles per hour. And so people are flying past at obviously 140, 150, 160. And so, I would get this little Fiat up to 130, 140, and it would start to lose power. So as a highway if I had an incline on the highway, a really slight one, like a really long swooping incline, then the car would lose power. And at one point, it just went I had my foot all the way to the floor, and I watched it slowly go from 140 kilometers an hour down to like 90 before I got to another hill, a decline. So then it started picking back up to 140, and it was the most frustrating thing. So then we stopped to get gas, and of course the gas pump looks nothing like the one in Lisbon that, I owe the country 25 euros for gas. But at least I had the experience of knowing what I was looking for. So this time I pumped the gas, then went inside and paid for it. And it was an easy transaction. Now, getting the car back to Lisbon Airport was a complete shit show. And my friend Kevin, who told us about it, said, make sure when you go back to Lisbon, you add an extra hour or hour and a half into your trip, because it is very difficult to get the car where it needs to be. So the rental company said, you need to take the car to Terminal 1, P1 parking level 1. We spent 45 minutes trying to find that, because if you miss it, then you leave the airport. There's no opportunity to loop back in like most of the airports we have here in the States, to where you go through the terminal and there's always that one lane that just returns you back to the airport and you could try again. Over there, you go past the airport, you miss the right turnoff or the correct turnoff, and now you have to do this giant roundabout just outside the airport, which is a complete crap show, because you have to be on the outside of 6 lanes, and there's 3 traffic lights in the roundabout. So you have to sprint from one light to another lane before the next light turns red, and then keep in mind you're in a super slow car, and you have to sprint over again. And then what happens is, the last part, when the light turns green, you have to cut across to the right. It's almost it's not a very sharp turn, but then you have 3 or 4 people across the lanes all trying to go to that one thing. So basically no one cares, no one uses a blinker in this country. Eventually we stopped and asked the security guy, I go, hey, where's P1 parking? Because at this point we're getting ready to, I wouldn't say we're going to miss our flight, but it was running really close, and it's an international flight going from Portugal back to Spain. So finally I go, yeah, when you leave this parking, you have to make an immediate U-turn and go right down. And there's no way we ever would have spotted that coming from the way we were coming. You would almost have to be going into the airport the wrong way, which obviously you would never want to drive the wrong way on a street, in order to see the sign for P1 parking. So we get the car, we go down, and I park it exactly where we picked the car up. And it says when you drop the car off, you need to go to the car whiz office. We couldn't find the car whiz office. I probably parked on the wrong level. And so this was Terminal 1. We go inside and we're like, okay, we need to check our bags. Where is Vueling, which is our airlines? And they go, oh, Vueling, that's in Terminal 2. So at this point, we haven't officially dropped our car off yet, because I still have the key, because we don't know where the car whiz office is. We're looking at our phones. We're running out of time. Yvette's getting stressed out. I'm already stressed out. And so we get on the bus to go to the next terminal. This bus sat there for 10 minutes waiting to get filled up. We're looking at our clocks. I still have to return the car. Yvette's like, well, how are you going to return the car if we're on the wrong terminal? You're going to take that and you're going to come all the way back over here? And I go, no, I'm just going to call them. So once we got to the Terminal 2, because I'm a regimented person in a sense where I go, yeah, we have a lot of weird stuff going on, but our number one goal isn't returning the car, because the car is technically already back. it's checking our luggage. And so, we went to the Vueling thing, the Vueling check-in, and of course, every machine that they have that worked beautiful on the first part of the trip is broken. The ones in Barcelona worked, the ones in Lisbon were broken, so we had to go to the counter. The guy at the counter is slower than that sloth on Zootopia. I bullshit you not, I am not kidding. He starts printing out our luggage slips and just slowly trying to peel the sticker off the back. You can wrap it around the handle of the luggage. And he is taking forever. Slow. And I'm kind of looking at Yvette out of the corner of my eye. And she's kind of looking at me, smiling, because we're both like, are you kidding me at this point? After everything we just went through to try to park the car, then we got to deal with this slow dude. Finally gets one peeled off, but then we have 3 suitcases at this point. No longer 2. He takes the second one. Well, I take the second one. I put it on the belt. And he starts to measure it and ship it off. And that part of the belt broke. Stopped working. He's like, oh, now we have to wait. We have to call maintenance before we can check your third bag. And I'm kind of looking at him like, dude, are you kidding me right now? And the bag was it was probably 70% of the way to off the scale. And the woman next to him was like, I don't know what she said to him in Portuguese, but she said to him probably what we were thinking. Take your lazy ass in your little chair with the wheels on it and roll backwards 3 feet, grab the suitcase, put it on the other part of the belt so that we can weigh the third suitcase and get along with our business. Because he was kind of bothered and he did it. And I'm looking at him like, dude, that's what you do. You don't make the person sit there and wait. So finally, obviously he did that part. And then I put the third suitcase on there. He weighed that, gave us our passports back, gave us our suitcase slips back, and then we went. But I realized, because at this point, the rental car company had called me, because I called them on the bus between Terminal 1 and Terminal 2, and I go, hey, this is so-and-so. I returned the car, and they go, wait, today's the 8th. I go, yes. They go, yeah, you have it to where you're going to return it on the 9th. I go, oh, oops. Anyway, I return it today, and I'm on my way to the second terminal. So the guy was nice, of course, and he's like, well, this is very complicated. I go, yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I apologize. He goes, no worry. I will meet you at Terminal 2. I said, okay, perfect. So this all happened before we dealt with the sloth from Zootopia. So at this point, the guy calls me on the phone. Now, so we have these travel phones. Shout out to Cell Shop for hooking us up. And I have my iPhone, Yvette has her iPhone, and then we have a travel phone because neither one of our phones are locked or unlocked. You needed an unlocked phone to use the app that we had that we put cellular on. And so we have to keep that phone next to our other phones when we use it for hotspot. So we had to use the travel phone this whole time as a hotspot, and then we had to connect our phones to the travel phone. So at this point, Yvette's phone still had cellular on it as long as you were on Wi-Fi. My personal phone does not. And so I had to connect that to the hotspot, and hotspot drops it like every minute or so. So then finally these guys call back and they're like, hey, we're here. And I go, okay, perfect. We had just dropped off our suitcase. We're getting ready to go to the terminal or the gates. Perfect. Fine. Awesome. I meet up with the guy, hand him the keys, say, I'm sorry. He goes, yeah, it's all good. Don't worry. Thank you, my friend. I'm like, all right, cool. So he has the keys to the rental car. That part's good. Beth's looking at me. I'm looking at her. She's like, woof, I thought we were going to miss our flight. I go, yeah, I was a little worried. I didn't think we were going to miss our flight, but it's an interesting story to tell. And so what happens is, as we start walking toward the gates, I reach in my pocket. I go, what's that? And I pull out the pocket, pull this thing out of my pocket, and it's the parking ticket you get when you hit the little button when you go to the parking garage, and it kicks out the little parking ticket that you usually have to pay your parking before you leave. I go, oh shit. I go, oh my God. I said, give me your phone. So I get her phone and I call the people, and Yvette's getting pissed. She goes, just let them deal with it. I go, no. Because if you let them deal with it, you no longer have control of the situation. Because if they wanted to, it could be in their contract that maybe they can charge me $500 if I lose this ticket. Although it only costs them like $20 to get the car out of parking at the most. And so I call the guy and I go outside to wait for him. And I realize the connection dropped on the phone, the hotspot. So I have to go back inside, find Yvette. And she's already pissed at this point. And I go, you have the travel phone. I need the travel phone. And, I go outside and then they show up, 6 minutes later. I do the exchange, go back in, we get on the plane, and everything's fine. That was my rental car experience, the full experience dealing with this thing. Finally, I want to talk about the movies I watched on the way back really quick. I watched one called Ford versus Holden. If you don't know what Holden is, Holden used to be an Australian car manufacturer. I know what Holden is because I used to play Gran Turismo all the time, the game that basically introduced cars to everyone else in the world. So Ford versus Holden is really about Australia. In Australia, they're the only people who made Holden cars, and Ford built Holden cars, or Ford had a plant in Australia. So the Fords in Australia look different than the Fords we ever had here. And so what would happen is Holden says, you know what, we're going to make our own. So they make like a Holden Monaro car is what they call it, or the Holden Falcon. And then Ford's like, oh yeah, well, we're going to make the Ford Falcon. And Peter Brock, which is a very famous race car driver, a car builder, Peter Brock, which is a very famous car builder here in the United States, had a big part to do with this whole rival, racing cars over there, racing for Ford or racing for Holden or something like that. You can look it up. But every time Holden made a car, Ford made the same car but made it better. So in 1998, the VT Coupe Monaro ended up being the Pontiac GT that we have here. It was a Holden over there. But what happened was, they kept battling and having these wars, these races, and it's basically the same car racing itself. It's almost like saying that, do you guys remember Mercury? Ford and Mercury, they're the same, but they're different. No, that's Ford and Holden. They're the same, but they're different. It's almost the exact same car, but it's just a little bit different. But what happened was but the thing about this is they both basically ruined themselves, and then ultimately, unfortunately, Australia got ruined because of that. So in 2016, Ford stopped making cars in Australia, and in 2017, Holden stopped making cars in Australia. So as of today, after 91 years of there being Ford versus Holden, there are no cars that are Australian by make in existence anywhere in the world. So people drive the older ones that I think the last one rolled off the lot in, like I said, 2017. Ford made in 2002. Oh, yeah. The Tom Brady film. I watched a Tom Brady film. Why not? And I watched one called The Book of Clarence, which is Lakeith Stanfield. That's a very interesting movie. I enjoyed it. It's a little weird. If you're strong in your faith, really strong in your faith, you may like it. But if you take your faith too seriously, you may find it very blasphemous because it's another take on Jesus and his disciples in the book. You know how Judas betrayed Jesus. The Last Supper, being crucified, rising around, being crucified and then risen. Like this movie took a very comedic spin to that story. I don't go to church, but I understand. I know more. I don't know. I don't really go to church, but I know what all that stuff is because I used to go to church my entire life. I liked it. It's called The Book of Clarence. Check it out. Then I watched Ferrari with Adam Driver, and that was interesting too. Michael Mann, if you guys know that name, Michael Mann brought us Miami Vice, and also did the Miami Vice movie and did a few other movies. That movie was really cool. It was wicked, kind of crazy, focused too much. It focused more on less on the cars, in my opinion, and more on his weird relationship between his wife and his mistress and his kid, Diego, which I guess he couldn't claim for a long time. So he basically had a kid and hung out with his mistress and the kid separate from hanging out with his wife because he had just lost a son, I think the year before the movie took place, Enzo. Dino. He had just lost his son, Dino. So when the movie picks up, he's mourning Dino. His wife is mourning Dino, and they're not speaking. So they have basically a crappy marriage. But she runs all the books for Ferrari. And so they have this unified front, although behind scenes, they're not really that fond of each other. And it focused around the Migli? Damn it, I said it wrong. But that was a very famous race, very controversial race. It was 1,000 miles, 1,000 kilometers, and people died all the time. So I'll just leave it at that. But it was a really cool movie. Yeah, and then we got home on May 10th. So, that This episode was a little longer than I intended it to be, and I did some rambling, so for that I apologize. I hope I didn't promise to deliver on certain things that I didn't actually cover. So if I missed something that you wanted me to cover that I promised I would cover, because I'm actually recording this over the section of a couple days, hardparkingpodcast@gmail.com. So with that being said, I want to thank Right Honda and Right Toyota out of Scottsdale, Arizona, 4wheelonline.com. Special shout out to Cell Shop Wireless Services. Without Cell Shop's assistance, I don't know what I would have done in Europe, because again, our phones were locked and I needed an unlocked phone. Autocannon, officially licensed Honda and Acura gear. Patreon business supporter, Koei Automotive out of Winter Garden, Florida. Pell Construction out of Coventry, Michigan. Automotive Specialty Tool out of Owings Mills, Maryland. Big House Small Home Design out of Ashburn, Virginia. Shaping success with the one and only Wes Tankersley out of Boise, Idaho. If you want to help the podcast upgrade, you can join the Patreon for those $3 a month. I mentioned that earlier in the show. Patreon.com, Hard Parking Podcast. Shout out to Mark Stillman, Catherine Cox, Eddie Ramos, Richard Graves, Byron Jones, Bo Jung, Oscar Mina, Drew Bunker, Yasu Chiba. Happy birthday, Oscar Mina, by the way. If you're interested in picking up Hard Parking Podcast shirt, go to hardparkingpod.com. Follow me on Instagram at Jhae Pfenning. To see the travels, go to J_travels. Follow me on TikTok at HardParkingJ. Join the Hard Parking Violations Facebook group. And remember, I can't grow. Let you tell them grow up how great the show is. Let's do this. Let's grow this thing together. And I will talk to you all next week.